It's a great pleasure for me to introduce Dr. Waleed al-Bonni, who has come here to Vienna to participate in this conference and to speak about the Syrian revolution in the context of the Arab Spring and the overall drama, so to speak, that the Syrian people are having to deal with in the context of both the regime's violence and the struggle for freedom and the lack of respect thereof by Western states. He's a former Itelierhaus head of committee, spokesperson, and he's one of the leading Syrian oppositionals who is a member and a part of the initiation process of the Damascene Spring and the signer of the treaty
declaration.
The Damascene Declaration. Thanks. So I'll pass on the microphone to you if you would like to introduce yourself properly. Please.
Okay. I am Waleed al-Bonni. I am a Syrian politician. I have left Syria just since 2 years after more than 8 years of prison in the area of Bashar al-Assad. With a lot of my colleagues, we have based the Damascus Declaration movement in 2001, and we get 10 of us to the prison for 5 years. After what Bashar al-Assad has claimed about his reforms. And in the beginning of the Syria revolution, I get prisoner again with my 2 sons for 3 or 4 months. After that, I get out from the country. I lived in Paris for 2 months as a Syrian SNC Foreign Office manager, and in Egypt for 7 months, and now I'm living in Budapest in the neighborhood of Vienna. Yesterday we have heard a lot of very deep analysis about what is happening now in Syria, but in the point of view of researchers. What I would like to say today is how Syrian politician or Syrian freedom fighter could see what's happening now in the country and what kind of solution could be to put an end to this tragedy. I will speak for 10-15 minutes. I will be very happy to have questions if it will be. Thank you. In the beginning, some briefing about why the Syrians have started their revolution. We know that the Arab Spring started 3 years ago when Mohammed Bouazizi set himself on fire, signifying in his action that the Arab people had had enough of the humiliation, mortification, and corruption of the dictators ruling them since independence. A policewoman's slap on Bouazizi's face was the stroke that broke down fear and silence. Revolution of freedom started in Tunisia, spread to Egypt, knocking down 2 tyrant regimes in less than 2 months. The youth in Libya and Syria were also inspired to put an end to the long period of darkness under 2 of the most savage regimes in the world. We have the 3rd one in North Korea, of course. They too felt they were able to break their chains and walk towards freedom. The Libyans started off protesting peacefully, as we know, as the Tunisians and Egyptians had done. But the dictator Muammar Gaddafi unleashed the army and began killing them, turning the peaceful uprising into an armed uprising. The Libyans continued fighting while their tyrant continued killing them, using whatever weapons were at the disposal, and was about to win, until the international community decided, with support from the Arab League, to intervene on the part of the opposition. By the international intervention, the battle was sealed in favor of the opposition in less than 3 months. The Gaddafi regime collapsed. He was arrested and then executed, ending the era of the so-called king of the kings in Africa. The Libyan experience encouraged Syrians to break their barrier of fear, which had been reinforced by the arrest, torture, and killing in the brutal government repression of the uprising in Hama in the 1890s. The fall of Gaddafi gave the Syrians hope that they would not be facing the nastiest monster of their own, and that the international community and the free world, who stood beside the Libyans and used force to overthrow the regime that no less brutal than theirs, would not leave them alone in their own battle. But unfortunately, they were left. The disappointment on the part of the Syrians has only deepened their tragedy and led to serious distortions of their revolution. They put up with all the killing, arrests, and tortures, insisting on the peaceful nature of their revolution for the first 6 months. As the tyrant himself has admitted, as we know all. The regime, however, pushed them towards arming from the first day, with security forces detaining young demonstrators and torturing them brutally, insulting their family honors, even their religious beliefs, in a clear sectarian drive. Those detained were released as fighters in this regime project. As I witnessed myself during 60 days of detention in the Political Security Investigation Branch with my 2 sons. The regime wanted to turn the revolution of freedom and dignity into sectarian war. The rebels tried as much as they could to keep it peaceful. However, with the indifference of the international community and the regime's insistence on giving the uprising sectarian dimension by including the Lebanese and Iraqi sectarian militias, and by leaking videos of the killing of protesters through torture, with a focus on specific Syrian accents used by the regime thugs and death, as well as by setting free thousands of Salafi prisoners have came from Iraq during the American occupation. The regime ensured it could no longer remain the revolution peaceful. After a year of this battle, the soil had become fertile for extremism and for extremist groups. Following the ideology of Al-Qaeda to overcome the authority of the Free Syrian Army, some of those soldiers and commanders who defected from the regime with patriotic agenda away from extremism and sectarianism were attracted to those groups, encouraged by the support and the allegiance-buying practices. All of this happened on front of the eyes of the regional, and international intelligence agencies. There was a sequence of false promises of support for the patriotic and democratic forces that could have turned the tables in favor of the revolution and faced the regime, to acquiesce to a political solution that could have accomplished what more than 200,000 deaths did not. Several hundred thousand people have experienced arrest, torture, while millions were displaced inside the country and out. The previous leads to asking, as the Syrian, what's arranged for Syria? What's arranged for Syria? To be the cemetery of the Arab Spring? Fearing the spread of this protest movement to other regimes in the region? Did they want to give their people a horrible example by pushing the Syrians to this tragic destiny? Or did the Americans and the Russians want Syria to be a place they can reduce the power of Hezbollah militia, Iran, and Al-Qaeda all together by putting them into a battle with each other and with a single loser, the Syrian people? In the end, I'm sure the Syrians will win, but the price will be very high. The price will be very high not just for them, but for those too, for the sides that are working to stem the crisis, either support the tyrant or block the chances of political solution that would put an end to the regime and maintain the unity of the land and the people. The Arab Spring may be delayed by some time, but history teaches us always that people yearning to freedom will never stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your speech, and the points you made, I think, are very valid, very solid, and need to be addressed, especially in the context of reconciliation and the future outlook of Syria. I mean, we talked about, yesterday we had a bit of an over-focus maybe on the Sunni jihadists, but if we simply concentrate on this side, we neglect the thousands of Lebanese Hezbollah fighters from
Iraqis and Iranians.
And the Iraqis and the Iranian direct support by weapons and soldiers on the ground in Syria fighting with regime elements against civilians and local brigades and what have you. Do you see any, when you think about Syria with your personal experience in the background, do you see a potential reconciliation between the people with members of the regime, with members influenced by Sunni and Shia extremism in the next years to happen?
I think there is no other way but to create such kind of solution who could maintain the unity of the Syrian people. The Syrians have lived together since centuries without problems. Nobody in Syria before the Assad regime could think who is the president. We know that the prime minister of Syria for a lot of time was Christian, Faris al-Khoury, from very small Syrian minority, from the Protestant, Anglican, well, how could it say, I don't know. And the Syrians have accepted him as a prime minister and as the leader of the Syria. One Assyr politician, Mr. Said Ishaq, was Syrian president for a lot of days. And non-Syrians thought that it's a disaster because the Christian or the Alawite or the Druze. We know that the Syrian revolution against the French occupation was Druze, and every Syrian admitted him as a leader. Before this regime, there was no problem between the Syrians, Christians, Alawite, Shiite, or Sunnis. This regime has tried to base itself on a sectarian base. Of course, our Alawite brothers are not guilty of this. A lot of them now is in the prison, a lot of them in the opposition. A lot of them were killed by this regime because they yearned to freedom, like every Syrian. But he always tried to use this sectarian sense for a lot of people, of non-educated people, to say that this regime will owe the minorities in Syria. This was about what my colleague before speak about the Syrian Electronic Army, why he is using the Christians' symbols always. This is orientated to you, not to the Syrians, to say to the whole world, this battle is between me as the protector of the minorities and those devils, Al-Qaeda and Daesh. Of course, the Al-Qaeda organization are devil. I admit that. They will not provide the Syrian better future than that. But it's not my destiny to choose between the killer, tyrant, or Al-Qaeda. The Syrians deserve to live freely without those two devils. I don't know if it's enough for you.
Well, thanks. Are there any questions from the audience? We'll have about 10 to 15 maximum minutes for questions, and please keep it brief and be precise. One question, and if you have much more to say, I will invite you to have that talk with Waleed later at the buffet. So would you like to begin?
No. Can you give her the mic?
We don't have a second microphone.
Can you come here?
Or can you come here and... Please, Steve.
I was saying that most of the Syrians, they wanted reform. At the beginning, when if you want to call it revolution, although I don't agree with that for different reasons, they wanted reform, and when they realized that it's going to be like Iraq and some powers are interfering, they backed off and they stayed back home in their houses because they realized that it's going to be another Iraq. And it proved to be, because we saw...
It was made.
Made by whom?
Okay.
Who brought the...
I will answer, please.
Who brought the al-Qaeda to Syria?
Okay.
Dr. Benotman is fighting himself.
Yeah, okay.
That's your question, please.
Are you finished? Are you finished? Okay. Yeah. Okay, I admit that after the interfering, after Bashar al-Assad have released more than 1,000 Salafists, those who have sent them to Iraq, when the trouble was in Iraq, he has released them. I was in the prison with them, and I know what had happened with them when they came back from Iraq. After 3 months of the revolution, I respect what my citizenship says, that he didn't call it as a revolution. He could do so, but it is. Yes, they were inside the prison, they released them, and they didn't release Abdulaziz al-Khair or Khalil Ma'touk. Abdulaziz is Alawite, Khalil Ma'touk is Christian. He's still in the prison. But there is no Salafist prisoner now inside the political prisoner in Syria. He released all of them. When Bashar al-Assad sent his aircraft to bomb Raqqa, he never attacked Daesh. Everybody who is seeing the news know that very well. Of course, there are some people who are pro-revolution in the beginning, now didn't see their future with Al-Qaeda and Daesh. That's true. But who did that? Who killed more than 6,000 Syrians in the first 6 months, where there was no weapon, where there was no violence? I was a protester in Harasta. We went to the churches with olive branch to see we are peaceful. They killed more than 20 colleagues of me, young men, in 25 years. I saw them. Nobody tell me that. So I didn't want to go into this propaganda that it is a conspiracy on this regime. This regime has always a way to make a relationship with terrorism. We know which relationship he has with the Iraqi terrorists, with Hezbollah, with others in the region. I think we have to make sure to, lady, that Syria, after this dictatorship, will not be in the hand of Daesh and al-Nusra, will be in the hand of all Syrians. And you will have a right to deny me as a politician without to get prisoners. And I became, when I said I don't want Bashar al-Assad to be president. I never have a violence or a weapon. And I get prisoner for 10 years with my colleagues. You will not be so when Syria will be free.
Are there any more questions? Please, again, I'll ask you to respond in private. And number one, number two, would you like to speak either up or to the microphone?
I think in person. I appreciate very much your anti-sectarian message. And I think, to a certain point, it's absolutely true that this regime caused sectarian violence. On the other side, I think it's a bit too easy to say that before that, we didn't have any of these problems. Because
we don't have what?
No, before the regime.
Yeah.
Because Arab nationalism was not just an issue for the Hezbollah. It existed before that.
But not in the power.
And it's much more widespread than just in the regime. And we had these discussions yesterday about the question of the Kurdish autonomy.
Okay.
And we see that it's a problem also for much of the Arab opposition. And I really would doubt. I agree that nobody would have a problem with a Christian or Alawi or Ismaili president. But I would doubt that the same would be true for a Kurd. Not to talk about, it's not really existing anymore, but before the regime existed, not to talk about the Jewish minority. So as long as you would identify with the concept of an Arab Syrian nation, you wouldn't have a problem with that.
Would you like to respond?
But what about the concept of citizenship, every Syrian, that includes also Kurds and other national minorities, and not just the sectarian?
My Kurd colleagues here know me very well, and they know what my opinion about the Kurdish issue in Syria. When we are speaking about the democratic Syria, the Kurdish will have the same right like any other Syrians. The injustice that the Kurds have suffered under al-Ba'ath Party will be ended. We will not be able to build a new Syria with any injustice toward any Syrians. We will admit that Syria is not just Arab country. In Syria, we have Arabs, Kurds, Turkmen, Armenian, Assyrians, but all of them, Syrians, all of them must have the same right to be anything they could be to be in the Constitution. I think in the new Syria must be a modern, democratic, human rights respective constitution. Without this, we will not build a new dream in our country.
Thank you. Is there one question was over here? Would you like to?
No, I prefer shouting.
Okay.
Since 2 days I'm listening the external countries or powers getting involved in the crisis. But I don't know much about the society itself. Who is supporting Assad regime inside the society? So for 3 years he's still there.
Yeah, that's a good question.
My second question is worth $50,000. What will happen? What will happen?
$50,000?
Dollars question. I want to hear.
Do you have the money on you?
Yeah, sure. What will happen in the end?
No, just a
Yeah, okay.
rhetorical.
Now, where is the dollars? Do you have here the 50,000? No, I will speak another way. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Who is supporting now Assad in the society? You know that without the military support by soldiers from Hezbollah and Iraqi militias, Irani militias, the regime was already ended. A lot of Syrians have defected from his army, but the regime have succeeded to turn this peaceful, democratic, freedom-yearning revolution into some kind of sectarian civil war. He has succeeded, we have to admit. And we were not enough powerful as the opposition to prevent him from doing so. A lot of minorities now think, by his propaganda, that the Daesh is al-Nusra is the substitute of him. That will make them not pro-revolution. But I can assure you that the minorities too have the same yearning for freedom and for get rid of dictatorship. But me as an opposition, international community must cooperate very actively to ensure them for their safety after this tyrant and this dictatorship. The international community didn't do what he has to do for more than 23 million Syrians. All Syrians are suffering, even those who are pro-regime. And I am sorry for every Syrian being killed, even pro-regime or against the regime. We are losing our young men. We are losing our youth. But whose guilt is, I think, primarily this kind of dictatorship who think that the power is, the father's power is his own and his powers will be for his son. The other 23 millions are just slaves of him. This concept in Assad's brain will not go and will not be acceptable for Assad to be in power after all this killing, torturing. You know, about 11,000 Syrians have died under torture. And you know those images and those photos that the big British advocate have approved it accurately. Thank you.
Yeah, well, as we talked over again, it's unfortunate that the Assad regime understands to play the sectarian card and point the finger to Daesh and Jabhat al-Nusra to justify a lot of actions, including using chemical weapons against their own population. So it's maybe tragic to say that the Assad regime is well connected and has a coherent organization, unlike the revolutionaries, and have an established worldwide network to broadcast this kind of message and place Syria as a risk factor in international security context, which is also part of this conference, because of course we have that side in the Syrian conflict where the West cares most about is Sunni foreign fighters going to Syria, but we are neglecting the Syrian people. That's why the second title is about the reconciliation, which we hope to emphasize in this afternoon. Can we have one more question?
One more question,
please. Dr. Khadr, would you like to have the microphone?
We had for 1970 at least 4 Kurdish presidents, many ministers, many heads of the army. We have no problem with them. And also, until this day, the head of the Syrian Chamber of Commerce, Jewish family, we have no problems. You are creating a problem.
No, he's not Kurdish. Okay. I will end it.
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
Would you like to respond quickly, or?
There's no question. It's just he answered.
And I would propose we keep this. We end this panel right now. We'll have another one with all 3 speakers after Mr. Marie-Therese's talk, and I would like to. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.